I'm using this chart because it is harmonious. And I think it's important to see how different people react to harmony and discord.
Okay.
All right. So let's take a look at this. And we're looking tonight at what is a predominantly harmonious chart. Now, as you can see, I've skipped the preliminaries this week. I figure you've all got that down. And I want to be able to spend more time on actually interpreting the chart and looking specifically at aspects and just getting more into the sort of the flesh of the chart. So we're going to start by looking at power, the distribution of planets among the houses, among angular, succedent, and cadent houses. This is something that we've done for the last 4 classes. The last class of the last series, and then this is the 3rd time in this series. Here is the chart. Let us look at angular houses for power. Houses 1, 4, 7, and 10.
Lonely little Pluto.
Yes, 1 planet in an angular house. Succedent houses 2, 5, 8, and 11.
Lots in 8. Yeah. 4.
Yeah, we have 4 in the 8th house. And for the cadent houses, which are 3, 6, 9, and 12,
4.
we have 5 planets. The Moon, Venus, Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune. So, we might think of this as sort of a moderately powerful chart, succedent and cadent, but very little angular activity.
Would it be inappropriate for me to ask a question about how much the total power of the chart is? Is it premature to ask that?
No, but you should have it on your handouts.
Is that the bottom of this?
It'll be under the column marked planets at the bottom of the chart.
Okay, 527, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Make sure I have the right.
So that's the total power in this chart. And that's just, I'd say that's above average in power.
Yeah. So there must be a lot of aspects.
Sorry, Barb, I meant to tell you to pick one up on your way to your seat.
I do. So,
Yes, and if you look at the second page, there are a lot of aspects.
So, Christopher, if there's the power in a chart, what is that specifically signifying? Because even though there's one powerful angular house, one powerful planet in an angular house, and then 4 and 5, but what? I mean, how is it just the? How do I say it? Oh well.
It's like when you buy your house. You might go and look at the circuit breaker box to get a sense of how many panels are on there. Mm-hmm. And you might even have, when your house is being inspected, to see whether you can put on an electric dryer, or if you might be able to run a spa.
Okay. I remember last week. I wrote that down.
Okay.
I understand.
So it just helps us to know what the potential is within that chart, whether that potential is lived up to or not. But it gives us, a sense of how many appliances it can run and whether they're really large appliances. All right, any question on the power? Now, let's look at quality for...
So what kind of conclusion do you draw when you say, okay, this is probably an above average powerful chart? So the conclusion that you would draw from that would be that this person has adequate energy to accomplish their goals?
That's a good explanation. And of course, Vicki, it's a different process when you're sitting down as an astrological counselor with someone and advising someone on their chart. Mm-hmm. I had another great response last Friday when a client came in who at age 74 had never had her chart done. And at the end of the session, she said, well, within 5 minutes, you had nailed me. And she said, I wish I had had access to this earlier in life. It would have helped a lot. So when you're advising a client, it's a little bit different than when you're looking at the life of a historic person or somebody who's already made it to the news. We use the information a little bit differently. When you're advising someone, you're able to sort of guide them with it, especially if somewhere in the course of a session, somebody is talking to you about their, hopes and dreams and wishes, and you can get a sense of, to some degree, more or less, how much of that they might be able to accomplish, and to be able to guide them with that, or to direct them of their many different plans, which ones might be most successful because of the volume of energy and where it's expressing in the chart. When we're working with somebody whose life has already been formulated and we're using it as sort of a case history, the process is just a little different in that we can only apply that to our assessment of, what is this person working with? Chances are, if I've got them up on the screen, though this may not always hold true, but if I have them up on the screen, you might actually know their name. Because for me, that's the advantage in a class, is being able to talk about someone we know. So there is a good chance that the charts will either have above average power, meaning that they've done something of notoriety in their life, or if it's below average power, then there's somebody who has lived up somehow exceptionally to their potential. And those are the charts we really have to take a look at. When there's a low amount of power, what have they achieved?
And one more question on power. So 527, we've talked about how planets in angular houses are much more powerful and all that kind of stuff, but are we looking just at this number down here, or are we looking at this whole process of angular succeeding,
We just looked at the process of angular succeeded and cadent before looking at that number.
Right.
Because that number is something else, and normally I wouldn't look at that number at this point in the interpretation, but we jumped, we put the cart ahead of the horse at this point. Normally we're just trying to assess from looking at the chart. The astrodynes, again, I think are incredibly valuable, and I will always say, because back at the beginning of last week's class, and forgive me if I digress here, we were responding to Mike's question about, would you write a report? And I said, well, I wouldn't, but you might, and somebody else might. Most persons' capacity for information is limited. And I will tell you right off, if you were going to just spend 15 to 20 minutes with someone talking about their chart, cut to the chase. Whip out the astrodynes and refer to that. Because if you talk about their dominant planet signs, houses, and aspects, and then briefly discuss the harmonies and the discords, you will be hitting so many nails on the head in a row that person will feel that they've really received some satisfaction from that brief amount of time. So if that's the only amount of time you have to just cut to the chase, and you don't go through all of these processes. But we go through all these processes as learning, because that's how we learn. We just keep repeating this until it really starts to make sense to us. And when we can just look at a chart at a glance and draw conclusions about it.
Well, because that's what you do as a professional, right?
Yes.
It's like you've done these steps so many times, it's like you don't have to look.
No, I don't sit down with the client and go, well, you know, you only have one planet in an angular house, but you've got, you know, 4 in succeedent and 5 in cadent. Because 1, that's not going to mean anything to them unless they've been a student of astrology. And if they've been a student of astrology, there's a really good chance they have that information already. But this is what an astrologer does, and this is how I'm trying to train you, is that the astrologer assimilates all of this information and synthesizes this information. And it guides the way in which you speak to your client.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
More about, okay, so in this chart, there is just this one planet in angular house. It's Pluto in the 10th. But when you're looking at that, would you take into consideration the house that it happens to be in? I mean, okay, there's only one, but it's in the 10th house.
Right. And what we will discover when we look at this chart is, hey, Michelle, come on in. There's an empty chair over here. Because, again, all we've looked at thus far to determine the power is house position. The other thing that determines power in a chart are the aspects, the significance of those aspects, their closeness and proximity, whether they're applying or separating. And again, one doesn't give that information to the client. You just go into your interpretation. And because of that information, if we were to just look at the classical rules and just look at house position, we might assume Pluto's the most powerful planet in that chart. But when we add in the astrodynes, which we'll do at the very end of our session today, we'll discover that Mercury and Mars, which are within 1 degree conjunction of one another, they fall within 43 minutes of one another. These are the dominant planets in the chart. And these two planets are forming aspects to, just about everything in the chart. So it's from the aspects that they receive their energy and not by house position. And that bumps Pluto down to being the 3rd strongest planet. So as a generality, though, we will know that Pluto will be significant in this chart, as will the 10th house. And then when we look at the astrodyne report, we see, well, yes, Pluto's 3rd in power, and the 10th house is the 2nd most powerful house. So it gives us a level of information. And again, these are the steps that were available to standard astrologers or classical astrologers prior to the invention of astrodynes. There's this comfy chair over here if you want to just ease into it and make yourself at home, Wellington. Oh, here. This will be your handout for the evening. Both sides. Okay. Quality. Why do we want to know quality? Whether somebody is movable, fixed, or mutable?
It tells you a lot about how they're going to approach, what kind of things they'll be interested in doing, working on, accomplishing, in terms of whether they want something new to work on, or whether they like to take something that someone else started and work with it.
Yes, it tells us all of that. It tells us sort of the speed at which they're moving and the degree of flexibility they have as a person. So, we're interested in it as it relates to this chart tonight. So if we look first for movable, we can see that there are 4 planets in movable signs. If we start going this way, 1 planet in Aries, Venus. 1 planet in Cancer, Uranus. 2 planets in Libra, Saturn and Neptune. 4 planets in movable signs. That's a good chunk. So from that, we could certainly determine that this is somebody who likes to instigate things to a greater or lesser degree. There are 2 planets, plus the midheaven and the ascendant in fixed signs. Moon in Aquarius, Pluto in Leo, midheaven in Leo, ascendant in Scorpio. So that's almost an equal amount in the fixed signs, which are the perfecters of the zodiac. These are the people who are the stone polishers that really like to work something into its excellence. And then there are 4 planets in mutable signs. Where are they? Boom, 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 boom. 4 in Gemini in the 8th house, mutable signs. So here again, if we're just looking at the standard astrology breakdown, would be inclined to say that the elements are, the qualities are fairly equal. And in truth they are. When we look at our Astrodyne report, and you don't have the advantage of this in your handouts, but I'll give it to you. The movable signs have 29.2%. The fixed signs, 37.6%. And the mutable signs, 33.2%. So the Astrodynes really help us to refine our search.
And the fixed there's a greater percentage of fixed energy than, is that what you just said? 39%?
Yes,
And there's only 2 planets.
midheaven and
The
ascendant.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the midheaven and the ascendant receive a lot of aspects. Pluto receives a lot of aspects. So here again, this is where the generalities we look at first cannot take into account the aspects. And the only thing that can take into account the aspects is Astrodynes, because it assigns a value, a power value, according to the nature of the aspect, according to how close it is in proximity, whether it's applying or separating. So it's through that process that we get a much more refined answer, and it's something at a glance we would not have picked that out. Because as Vicki, when she looked at it, she only saw the planets and ignored the angles. And we can see that there is some really close proximity of aspects with those, even here. Okay, so what do we know about this man? Average power and just a tiny bit rigid. I met with a client today who had very dominant fixed signs, dominant Taurus and Leo. And as I always say about Taurus, their first answer to everything is usually no. 3 days later, they may come back as though it was their own idea. And then they'll move with it. But when confronted with a change of plans or something that was not at all on their radar, it's like, So, in the course of this session, I was mildly entertained because any of the suggestions I gave, the immediate answer to them was, no. Oh, no, I couldn't do that. No, I'm not interested in that. But this is someone who, over time, it may take years, will actually massage some of those ideas and set about utilizing them somehow. So that's what quality tells us. It really gives us a key of how somebody's going to take the ball and run. All right, triplicity equals temperament. Temperament equals everything you do in life. Your temperament determines the way in which you function with other people in the world. It determines the way in which you interact in your relationships with others. It determines the type of occupation to which you are attracted. Triplicities are the elements: fire, earth, air, and water. And before I go further, Michelle, were you able to download the handouts from the previous course?
I haven't done it yet.
Okay. Do try, because it will put you on the same page as the rest of us. So that a lot of this, that we're sort of glossing through this right now because we're all sort of up to equal speed in the class. And some of it may be things that you need to take notes on, but if you go to those handouts, this will all be written out for you, and it'll make it much easier. So let's look at this chart, and let's look at what we have. 2 planets plus the midheaven in fire signs. Venus in Aries, Pluto in Leo, midheaven in Leo. No planets in earth signs. Any thoughts on that?
They have to have a permanent Saturn to keep them glued to the Earth.
Yeah.
Theirs is in Libra though, and
I know.
so I don't know.
Wouldn't it be glued? Maybe they
So
don't even be-
if you have no Earth, then would your practicality
Is impaired.
less practical?
You have practicality impairment.
Yeah.
And the way I usually see that in others, and of course some might argue that with me, but I oftentimes see it as someone who's unable to see the consequences of an action. They'll love the idea, the project, they'll rush into it, and they'll do something, and then the end result is not what was expected.
Right.
So it's oftentimes it inhibits the ability to see something to its practical outcome, which has its advantages. Because here again, if we always knew how something would turn out, we would not embark upon many things in our lives. That's why most of us are not shown our lifeline until we're dying. I mean, please, when people who have had near-death experiences, they always talk about the fact that their life flashed before their eyes from beginning to end in every single event. Now, what would happen if you had seen that at the beginning of the movie?
Wouldn't have been exciting.
Yeah, it would not have been nearly as exciting, and there's many things you may not have done because of what their outcomes would have been. We tend to avoid painful outcomes by all cost. Yet the painful outcomes are oftentimes the things that shape us most.
Well, I don't have any Earth in my chart, but
Are you ever surprised at how things turn out?
sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I have to think about it.
Yeah, just think about it. Just tuck it into your thinking cap.
Right. I like the way things come out. How's that?
Good.
Well, you have a really positive outlook.
Yeah, that comes from a dominant Jupiter. Well, that was an unexpected outcome. All right, 1 planet plus the ascendant are in water signs. What is the issue if there's a lack of water in a chart?
Less emotional.
It's hard to have empathy or sympathy.
There's the answer I was searching for, though all of the other answers are correct. But I think the greatest tragedy when there's a lack of water in the chart is there is a lack of empathy in the individual. Empathy is what gives us compassion. It's what allows us to feel of like pathos with another person. Persons who lack empathy, what can happen? Yeah, psychopaths or sociopaths. That can happen. Why?
They don't care.
Yeah, they have no empathy.
No guilt?
There's no guilt, and there's no sense of resonance with what another person feels. Yes. Don't tell me you have no water in this.
No.
Okay.
Well, it always used to amuse me that President Clinton, who I really liked a lot, would always say, "I feel your pain," and he had absolutely no water in his chart, zero.
Maybe one of his handlers taught him that.
I think maybe Hillary taught him that.
Okay.
She used to laugh at him.
I think she has Scorpio, right?
Yes.
And she was Scorpio.
There's that Scorpio again.
Yeah, you'll feel my pain, all right.
What you're saying is, what I want to see if I'm right. The more planets you have, like in the water sign, the person's more emotional. But the more powerful that planet is, even the more emotion
Yes.
is more powerful for that person.
And what I think is important is looking not only at your dominant element, but what element is really lacking. And I believe it was Jung who really felt that through his studies of astrology, that one had to go to that area that was deficit in their chart. And those were qualities that had to be built into the character. In Hermeticism, we talk about it through the perspective of alchemy. And we're looking not as much at as elements or temperament as we do at the qualities of the planets symbolized by metals, and wanting to make sure that there is an even balance within the makeup of the individual, that contributes to the wholeness of a person. But it's also really important to look at this, because where you have a deficit is actually something you have to learn to build in. We might encourage this individual in the realm of empathy, and also in the realm of seeing what the end result of an action might be, because of the lack of earth and the limited water here. Air is the dominant element in this chart at 46.6% when we look at the astrodynes. So what would that tell you about someone?
They're all in their head.
Yeah, they live in the realm of their ideas, of their thinking.
So could they make the practicality in their own mind, but they're not applying it to their life? Or could they be thinking a lot about trying to heal themselves, to be a more practical person? If there's no earth signs in it, I'm just trying to...
I like the latter, thinking about how one heals themselves to be more practical, and the way one really becomes practical, the way you develop common sense, is by being able to project out into time. That if I do this, this is the resultant gain from an action.
That makes sense, because when the first job I ever took, I realized that, they probably gave me a job that I didn't really deserve. And
What was that, Vicki?
it was administrative. But what I realized is that I was creating a lot of work for the accounting people, because I didn't really have a grasp of what it was that they were doing, and I could see what I was doing, and it made me really focus on that. And so that was my compensation.
You had to compensate for a deficit.
Right. Exactly.
And that's something we all have to do. It's really good to go home and look at your own chart, look for the strength among your elements, and look for the deficit, and think of what is the method of compensation that you'll consciously build into your soul, build into your character. All right, where where do we place our importance in life? What are we focused on? We are either focused on the societies, which is the breakdown of the chart into 3 areas: personal, companionship, public. Personal houses, 12, 1, 2, and 3. We have Saturn, Neptune, the moon. Companionship houses, 4, 5, 6, and 7. We have only 1 planet. Public houses, 8, 9, 10, and 11. There are 6 planets. What interests this man?
The public.
Public.
Being out there.
Where is his deficit?
Companionship.
Companionship. So, here again, if there is a lack of empathy in a chart and a lack of companionship, one has to really work at developing those skills. I imagine in this chart it's hard, primarily because the only planet in a companionship house opposes the ascendant.
But it's Venus.
In the 6th house.
It's Venus to get expressed.
Right. It's a difficult expression. Oftentimes when Venus is involved in an opposition, there are issues over reciprocity, that one doesn't always feel even exchange, which can go either way. Someone could love you far more than you love them, or vice versa. You could pine after somebody who shuns you. Now, the trinities is another distribution in the chart. Where do we place our energy? Is it in matters of life? First house, your health, your vitality, your physical body. The 5th house, which is your love affairs, your hobbies, your creativity, your children, your fun and games. The 9th house, it's your travels, your adventures, your philosophy, that sense of curiosity and learning in life. So if there is a predominance in the houses of life, we see somebody who is what? Living life. Living life to its fullest. If wealth is the matter, the 2nd house of values, personal possessions, and money, 6th house of employment, and the 10th house of career and honor, then the emphasis is where? Work and profession and business. The houses of association, 3rd house governs our brothers and sisters as our earliest associations. Think of the twins, Gemini, associations within the womb. It also governs other relatives and neighbors, those immediate associates by proximity. The 7th house deals with public associates to some degree. They are the significant others in your life, which is both the public, your companions, and your partners on any level. And then the 11th house are your more casual associates. These are the people you meet through public activity, through group activities, through socializing, though they're not necessarily the significant others in your life. If association's powerful, what do you live for? The company of others. And lastly, psychism, what I like to call psychoism, is 4, 8, and 12. The 4th house is family, but the 4th house also rules a whole esoteric ball of wax in a chart. And it's kind of all the woo stuff that comes up around environment. The character vibrations of environment, the unseen psychic imprint or atmosphere of environment, the imprint of the family on the psyche. The 8th house are definitely I look at 8th and 12th house as both symbolizing disembodied entities. These are intelligences that are non-physical, that can impact the individual. But the 8th house certainly lends to a fascination with death, dying, the spirit world. And the 12th house I like to look at as being inner space. And that's, everything that's tied into our psyche and our subconscious and the way in which we access that through, be it psychology or symbol systems such as, tarot, runes, astrology, etc. Well, in this chart, one planet in the Trinity of Life, Uranus, Cancer, 9th house. 2 planets in the Trinity of Wealth, Venus in Aries, 6th house, Pluto in Leo, 10th house. One planet in the Trinity of Association, which is the Moon in the 3rd house. And there are 6 planets in the Trinity of Psychism. What information can we glean from breaking this chart down this way? Where is his energy focused? Yeah, it is the strongest house in the chart at 27.5% of the power. That is over a quarter and less than a third, and the 12th house has 13.9% of the power. So if we look at the trinities, Psychism has 43.5% of the power. What does that tell us?
Very close to the inner world.
Thank you.
How,
Focused on the inner world. Bless you.
will we know that when we know this person?
I don't know, because it's his inner world.
Well, that's the thing. That was my point. How, that is something that is so hard to see, I think, in people.
You'll
They talk
recognize
a lot
it
about
when we talk about this
Okay.
person. You'll be able to see how these 2 houses are dominant in this person's life.
Right.
But these people that are really close to the inner plane, they talk a lot about it
Mm-hmm.
when they talk.
Is it John Edwards?
The presidential candidate?
There was a psychic guy.
Oh, the one with the Ouija board.
Yeah, okay. Clearly it's not John Edwards.
Okay. Well, it could be. I could just be joking with you. So it's something to think about. And here again, let's look for the deficit. And I'll give it to you for time's sake, which is the houses of association have only 13.3% of the power. What is lacking in this chart? Companionship, connectedness to others. We've seen that time over time again. Where is the connectedness happening? The other world. Yeah, the unseen world. Yeah. Curious, isn't it? Some of this will make sense when we...
His Neptune is strong, and being a Scorpio rising, and nothing in companionship. Before you mentioned it, I was just about to say, this looks like the chart of a psychic, more or less loner, who is secretive to boot.
Okay, hold that thought. Anything else anyone wants to say about that? Or shall we move on? All right. Let's start analyzing the chart. And again, as you know, I combine these next 2 steps, which is we're just going to go around the chart now. We're going to look at each house, what planets are in it, what planets govern the cusp of the house, and where they are disposited in the chart. So we don't even need to read all of this because how many times have you heard me say it? All right.
So when you do a chart, do you do the houses with planets in them first,
and give them special emphasis? Or you
No,
just
I do
start
both
going
at the
around?
same time. I'll give you an example.
Okay,
I'll model this for you.
okay.
When I start off reading a chart, this is where I begin. Why? Because I've already assimilated all of that other information. Usually in the past it was through setting up the chart, you actually took note of all of that. And so that was already assimilated by the astrologer, and it's used in their synthesis of interpretation. So I'll sit down with someone and I start right here, and I will say, in this chart, you have Scorpio on the ascendant at the time of birth. This is commonly called the rising sign. Anyone that dabbles in astrology will want to know what this is, because the rising sign has an impact over the character, the self-expression, and the personality. Scorpio was pictured in the heavens by the ancients as the scorpion
Or the eagle.
or the eagle, but we never see that in any astrological star maps. So we can safely assume that it was pictured by the creature of the same name, the scorpion, which is curiously a lethal creature. It has a stinger in its tail. Well, it's not really lethal to humans, except for that really huge Scorpio that went after Hercules. But
It hurts like heck if it's
yeah. It hurts like heck. And for smaller animals, it can kill a mouse. So, what we know is that Scorpio has a stinger. And one goes through and expresses, what are the interests of Scorpio? Planning? Desires. The key word for Scorpio is I desire. So Scorpio is a sign that's very much motivated by their passions. They're very distinct about their likes and dislikes. And they're very drawn sexually into the world. Those are the passions that are the qualities of attraction and passion and sensuality that motivates them. Since there is no planet in the first house, we'll still talk about the sign before looking for the rulers, because the rising sign's key in interpreting a chart. The best quality of Scorpio is?
Resourcefulness.
Resourcefulness. They're like the yellow pages. If you're looking for a hairdresser or a plumber, the Scorpio person can direct you towards someone, because they have their, fingers at their fingertips, all types of resources. Scorpio, in their resourcefulness, they, when they come into a room, they scout for the doors and windows, in case they need to make an exit.
And the exit sign.
Yeah, in the theater, they always look for the exit sign. So they're prepared. They'll sit on the aisle seat in the theater, because if they want to get out, they want to get out. And that's part of the resourcefulness of Scorpio. They can get into anything that interests them. They can get out of anything that they suddenly discover no longer interests them. The worst quality of Scorpio is troublesomeness.
Troublesome.
Yeah. Now remember, the scorpion has a stinger in the least suspecting part of the body. The way I see this in Scorpio, and we might all have a different take on this, but I see Scorpio personalities as being very probing. Very much like a good massage therapist, who they'll go to greet you and they'll put their hand right on the part of your body, which is like, That's what Scorpio personality does, only they're grappling with your other spots, the psychological issues. And they'll start probing or asking questions about them until the person gives them a response, or, draws their line in the sand and says, don't go there. On the other hand, Scorpio is incredibly secretive. They don't let on much about themselves. They tend to be the detectives and looking for and getting information from others, but not necessarily readily or freely giving out that information. So with a Scorpio rising person, you could wake up in the morning and they may start asking you questions. you could be interrogated about either what the day is going to hold for you or what happened yesterday, or they'll just ask questions for the sake of conversation.
You have to tell them your whole dream.
Or they will tell you their whole dream. No. They'll find out yours. So,
They're calculating as well, aren't they, Scorpios?
yes. In fact, vengeance is considered one of the worst qualities of the sign, and that takes calculation. Why? Have any of you ever watched samurai movies? Almost all Japanese movies, especially samurai movies, are about revenge. And the individual oftentimes waits their entire life to exact revenge. And that is what Scorpio represents, is that it's a fixed sign.
Yeah.
Heck, I've got all the time in the world.
I had a Scorpio brother-in-law who used to say, I don't get mad, I get even.
Mm-hmm.
That's, yeah.
Well put. And I always say, as a Sag, living well is the best revenge.
That's right.
Because, again, Scorpio gets caught up in those lower passions of revenge, getting even, exacting tribute. And what happens when you do that, the way I always describe it, it is like putting drops of poison in your own coffee, hoping the other person will die. That is the nature of that modality of operating in the world. Why? When you wait your entire life for revenge, you've lived your life seething and reliving that event over and over and over again. So you haven't really had the chance to live well.
I know 3 Scorpios. One's my daughter, and she's just like that. She's always stinging everybody. And then the other 2 Scorpions I know, they're like, do they have an ego? Instead of, she says it too, I am the Earth Scorpion. And then the other ones, they don't say ego, but they're so nice. I mean, they're so different. They're like really friends.
Well, and the other thing that can be helpful is looking at the relative harmony or discord of that. But the other thing is, how much work have you done on yourself in your lifetime? There are some people who will have certain qualities and decide that, and I've heard them say this, that I'm this way, and at this point in my life, I'm not about to change.
So they're kind of all like that Scorpio, like my daughter, but the other ones have kind of like learned a little bit.
Others have possibly learned. They have the potential for both, but something has caused them to choose the other.
Well,
And
it makes a choice where you're going to channel that energy. You can either channel it into something that is healthy or unhealthy and make a choice.
if you can discern. And some people are unable to discern. Question or statement, Barb, from the back there?
Statement from Renee, troublesome can be of the kind coming from over-helpfulness.
True. I see that more as the Aries troublesomeness. But yes, there is that sense of Budinsky that can sometimes be a part of the Scorpio nature. But it's also part of the Aries nature, who truly butts in. And that's the nature of Mars. The nature of Mars is if they see something to be done, why wait around? Mm-hmm. Oh, you were planning on doing that? When? Next month? So.
But the key thing about Scorpio is that it is this desire energy. So if you place your desires on something higher, then like the eagle, then it's easy to I think it would be much easier to transcend.
Now, well, here's something we haven't studied yet, but how many of you are familiar with the decanates of astrology? How many have studied, okay, course 7? Well then, look at what is the first decanate of Scorpio? What is the constellation? Scorpio, Scorpio decanate. It's the constellation of Ophiuchus. This is the man
Who wrestles?
pictured in the heavens, known in German as Schlangentranger.
His name's
That just sounds.
Schlangentranger is the German.
He likes it.
Say that again, Kristen.
I can't. Want me to say it 10 times fast. So, describe the image of Ophiuchus. This is a man who has a giant serpent passing between his legs, and he's wrestling with it.
Wrestling with his sexuality.
Yeah. So the first decanate of Scorpio has to do with those passions and those desires, and this constant battle of, are they controlling us or are we controlling them? Oh, no planets, unoccupied. What about the ruling planets? Pluto falls in the 10th house. So this man's personality could be strongly shaped by
Friends, career, business.
profession, career, business, one's boss's authority, public opinion. And Mars, the co-ruler, his personality could be shaped by his fascination with death, dying, the spirit world, the unseen realms, the occult, the metaphysical. So the passions, the personal passions, go both into the realms of death and into the realms of the public. Oh, let's go on. Scorpio rules the 2nd house.
More of the same.
How might money be achieved?
Saved through taking advantage of other people's money.
Okay, taking advantage of other people's money through inheritances, legacy, gifts, grants, loans, estate planning, investment planning, retirement planning, or Pluto in the 10th house working with a group, a corporation, a political entity, a labor force,
A large mass of people,
a mob.
a mob. Okay?
It's an organized mob, it's Leo.
Yes, a well-directed mob. All right, 3rd house, mental pursuits. We have the moon in Aquarius in the 3rd house, Capricorn on the ascendant, and Saturn becomes the co-ruler. Talk to me of the moon in Aquarius in the 3rd house. The moon governs our emotions, domestic urges. It's our mentality from the perspective of subliminal thinking, the unconscious urges that move through us.
He's a humanitarian in his nurturing and his thinking.
Thinking could be nurturing or fascinated by family. It's in the I know sign. So this is somebody who could be strong about his ideas, his conceptions, what he's learned.
Would that moon placement tend to make him a night owl in order to meditate or just clear his head and think?
Well, we might actually discover that when we discover this man's actions.
Okay.
So, and I would never have pulled that out myself, which is why it's great to do this in a group, because other people have insights that I won't have. So, there it is, right down at the bottom of the chart. Now, Aquarius is the man of the zodiac, from which we get the humanitarian qualities, the best quality being altruism, the worst quality being argumentativeness.
I'm curious where you get the night owl from.
Though I've been told, Barbara, by everyone who... Right, though everyone who is listening to what's going on in the classroom respond on the left-hand side of the screen and let me know if you can hear the comments of the other people in the room. If not, we will ask them to speak up. It's not registering here on our sound because the microphone's on me, but do let me know if you can actually hear, because in the past you've told me you can.
So are we saying that he meditates at nighttime because it's down in the nadir? Is that why you're saying that?
I was asking,
Yeah.
or suggesting maybe he was a night owl.
Yeah.
Because it's in that a night house? I mean,
Yeah,
the
his
house that
mentality,
corresponds
and
to-
yes, and the third house is kind of the basis of thought too, so
Those are secret thoughts.
in order,
Private thoughts.
Private thoughts.
so it seems to me for a person with that chart to clear their head and get really deep into their own mentality, these things would tend to happen in the late night, early morning hours.
What happens, though, when they get into their head? The co-ruler falls on the 12th house in conjunction with Neptune.
Psychic planet.
What's that?
Psychic planet.
The psychic planet.
Are very illusional about safety, and maybe since it's in the 12th house, a lot of keeping it secret, not really talking about it, or either they're thinking a lot about institutions and organizations.
Maybe have delusions towards females.
Females.
I think all of these could be accurate. And so what happens when he starts thinking is he is directed to this area of his consciousness, which is deep and internal. Wherever we have Saturn, we have lack or limitation. And or what type of thinking does Saturn trend towards? Safety and or thinking about what's missing rather than what one has. Being in a conjunction, a very close conjunction with Neptune, and everyone of this generation has this. Everyone born in 52 or so has this particular aspect, 53. So it just falls in different parts of the chart. But I find that that's a generation of people that really struggles with the fantasy versus reality portion of life. Those that get it can be brilliant because Neptune, of course, that upper octave of Venus, has this ability to fascinate and to imagine and to dream things, and the Saturn can allow them the ability to make it concrete. So if it's somebody who's actually learned a form of visual arts or caricature or something else, they can pull that out and find a creative outlet for it. But left to its own devices, there can often be at times be a lot of disappointments as to why things haven't turned out in a better way. Let's move on to the 4th house here. Home, family, father. Aquarius, unoccupied. 2 rulers, Saturn in the 12th, Uranus in the 9th. What can happen when the ruler of the 4th is in the 12th? The father can be absent in some ways, or there can be regrets or remorses about the father.
Father could went to prison.
Right? It could even be a situation where the father's gone to prison. Or, I mean, other extremes could be the child spending early childhood in an institution, such as a reform school or a boarding school, a military academy, something like that. That's not the case with this person, but I have seen that as being one of the expressions when the ruler of the 4th falls in the 12th. But what unresolved issues related to the father? The other, Uranus, when the ruler of the 4th falls in the 9th. One can live abroad. One can change their home and go to foreign countries. There could be something very conventional about one's living environment.
Yeah, nurture in an unconventional way. I mean, it's in Uranus is in Cancer.
Cancer. And you were going to say something, Vega?
Could it also mean that he would have sudden changes in his home life because of it being ruled by Uranus? Okay.
Abrupt or sudden changes in home. Something unusual about the home. All right. 5th house. Love, romance, creativity. Unoccupied. Pisces on the cusp. The 2 rulers are Jupiter and Neptune. Neptune falls in the 12th house of disappointments and remorse, unrequited love. Jupiter falls in the 8th house of other people's money, the spirit world, and death.
So he doesn't have much of a, probably don't have no children or have some very disappointment with children.
Right, one could be disappointed with children, have losses of children. One could be easily disappointed in love life. This is actually one of the weaker houses in the chart, which means a lot of energy doesn't flow there, yet Pisces is on the cusp. Is this man a romantic?
Very much so.
Would he have high ideals about love? And with that, it could be accompanied by also great disappointments. All right, 6th house. Work and the work environment. Aries is on the cusp. Venus falls in Aries in the 6th house. What type of work does Aries rule? Aggressive work. Military, police. Construction. Venus in the 6th house, one would want to work in somewhat attractive surroundings. And we might determine from Venus in Aries, because there is a lack of a social element in this chart, that where this man might draw in his social contacts, as well as possibilities for love, would be where? A work environment. Yeah. Where Venus falls in our chart, it is where we both receive gratuities, so work could come somewhat easily. It is also where we seek to find love. In this case, it's not only seeking to find a lover, but one might seek to love their work.
What about the fact that it's in Aries?
Which is opposite of Libra, the home. So this is the fall of Venus. Venus in Aries has issues. Primarily, the nature of Venus in Aries, remember this is a movable sign, and she falls in love quickly and falls out of love quickly. It's abrupt.
Quickies at work.
Quickies at work. In the copy room at the New Year's party.
It's harmonious with Pluto up there, so hey, it works.
Yeah, there's a lot of harmony in this chart. Venus, however, is not one of them. So, one would have to be concerned also with Venus and Aries in the 6th house so discordant, in that this is someone who might befriend co-workers or colleagues, but then also get frustrated. Mars, the co-ruler, falls in the 8th house. Could be an accountant, tax collector, mortician. These are all areas as well one could go in work-wise. Seventh house of marriage and partnerships, the weakest house in this chart at 1.8% of his energy. And Venus falls in the sixth house, opposing the ascendant. So what's one of the big issues here? Lack of love. Inability to find partnership.
Find some partner.
Right, more than likely, because that is a big empty spot here. And one either comes to terms with that. Keep in mind, Venus is also here opposing Neptune and opposing Saturn and the ascendant. So that is a real dynamic tension going on. The ruler of the seventh in opposition to everything. This is somebody who might have kind of personal habits that may tend to repel rather than compel others.
Would it be safe to say that this person repels Venus based on what he thinks about?
The deepest, innermost thoughts and or belief structures. Since Pisces rules the 12th house, I look at the 12th house as being our belief systems, whether they work for us or against us. Now, what about the 8th house in this chart? It's loaded. Jupiter, Sun, Mercury, Mars, all in Gemini.
So because Jupiter is on the closest to the cusp of the 8th house, that would be the ruler.
Right.
Even though the sun is there, right?
Yes. And Mercury is there, which is actually the dominant planet. Mercury and Mars are really the strongest planets in this chart. They're both just within an inch of one another in terms of power.
So would you then say that Mercury rules this house rather than Jupiter?
I
Is
would.
that what-
I
yeah.
would. But we're using the classical rules of astrology, which are everything prior to Astrodynes. We would go with Jupiter. I, on the other hand, using Astrodynes, would say that Mercury is actually the ruler of this house, and therefore thought is involved. And that comes as no surprise, since all four of these planets fall in the I think sign. And here is a rare example. I want all of you to listen closely. Here is one of the rarest examples in astrology where an intercepted sign is the most powerful sign in the chart. If you look at the cusp, we have the 29th degree of Taurus on the 8th house cusp. On the 9th house cusp, we have 1 degree of Cancer. All of Gemini is intercepted in the 8th house. But nevertheless, this sign has 25.7% of his power.
Wow.
So, here is a rare example for you. Talk to me about Geminis.
They think a lot.
They're communicators. They teach. They change their talents a lot.
Changeable.
Jobs are changeable.
All right. Their best quality? Versatility. And changeable, which has come up, is their worst quality. Now, we do joke about Geminis a lot. Maybe not in this room, but in the larger world sphere, people do joke about Geminis as being split personalities, multiple personalities, of their ability to even have inner conversation. With the 8th house, and I have met people with powerful 8th houses that don't have a lot of contact with the spirit world, and then there are others that do. One of the most fascinating charts is the chart of Padre Pio recently made a saint in the Catholic Church who had an 8th house like this. And when you read his autobiography or the biographies written about him, the other monks that lived in the monastery with him were getting so tired because at night, not what you're thinking, he was wrestling with demons. And there were all of these sounds coming out of his cell in the monastery as he was being tossed around by demons.
But wouldn't that say that he was thinking too much of them? They had more power over him?
We might say that as Hermeticist. In other traditions, there are other explanations for that. But yes, of course, whatever we think about most, we do draw to ourselves. But on the other hand, this is a west side house in a chart, which also means environment. And there are certain people who are of particular sensitivity that they do attract more interaction with the spirit world than others. And in this case, this is obviously not the chart of Padre Pio, because this is a 1953 birth time. But here again, this is certainly somebody who could wrestle with their inner voices or with what were impressions being received from inner plane influences or other plane influences.
Well, even if this person didn't acknowledge that there was an inner plane influence, they might think of themselves as just being sort of getting these flashes of insight or whatever.
And smarter than everyone else.
Yeah.
Because there's 4 planets in Gemini.
Right.
But most people that are rumbling around their room, they usually end up in a psych ward or on medication.
Mm-hmm. You are correct. Well, let's see if that happened.
I've never seen a chart with so much psychic energy going on.
I know, it's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
What about the... talk to me about this conjunction of Mercury and Mars. Why? Because this is the most powerful influence in this chart.
Well, there's got to be a lot of stress in this person's thinking.
Well,
Overwhelming thinking.
well, it takes action on his thinking.
Mm-hmm.
He's not afraid to get to the bottom of things. I mean, he's not afraid to dig deep, even though, Gemini, classically think of them as not,
That's superficial.
yeah.
And also,
But all of this superficiality is in a very deep house. This is the 8th house and the 12th house are profundity. So it's a curious combination.
And he does Scorpio rising, so nobody has any idea what this man's thinking.
but this person might get migraines. He might think a lot. A lot of energy is going into his thinking.
And it's, it's overwhelmingly Mars, Mars, all that extra energy.
What does Mars want?
Either construction or destruction.
Excellent. To build up or to tear down. And Mars in this chart is neutral. It's 0.49 astrodynes.
Wow.
It can flip either way. Yes, Barbara?
Alice Marie says thinking causes insomnia.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a little insanity here.
And a tremendous
Because of the
male
moon,
influence.
Mars, and Mercury.
The speed of the mind going here.
And I was thinking that with Jupiter on the cusp of the 8th house, that he would be overwhelmingly ruled by, yes, his thinking, but also to benefit others in some
Excellent point. Hold that thought. Jupiter and an 8th house like this, one of the best ways that a chart like this could be used is as a fundraiser. This is somebody who could pull together money
Huge amounts of cash.
for the benefit of others. Perhaps, widows and orphans.
Right. And the universal welfare urges do have influence over his thinking, his values, and his money, how he wants to make money anyway.
Let's move on since we're quickly running out of time. Uranus in the 9th house. Give me a couple of keywords.
Progressive in his philosophy of life, or ultra conservative.
Right. One is polarized. With Uranus, one is radical, either to the right or the left. Here, Uranus falls in Cancer, which actually has to do with homeland, home and family. It could be conditioned by family faith or family religion. So there is some impact there, but Uranus there also makes one attracted to what type of religion?
Way out ones.
Way out ones, unconventional. Uranus is the planet of
Who
the
accepts
occult.
a lot of psychic energy.
So this is somebody who's either looking for an occult religion or something that may have psychological value. The co-ruler is the moon, which falls across the chart in the 3rd house of private thought. So this is somebody that may also do private study in the area of his philosophies, religion, or might take a home study course in order to pass through college or computer course, had they been available back then.
But most occult students have to keep it private anyway.
You're correct. It is a private topic. 10th house of career, honor, reputation. Pluto is there in Leo. The sun is the co-ruler. Leo is on the midheaven. Is this person interested in prestige?
Yeah.
Yes. Their honor, their fame, their recognition is important to them. And their prestige could come through matters related to other people's money, so through fundraising or estate planning, through death, or through the spirit world. All right, what about Pluto in the 10th house? What would the profession be like? Groups?
Organizations.
What I have found with charts with Pluto in the 10th house is there is an inclination to do something that affects mass destiny. And this can take any, being the person that creates or invents something that goes on to impact, the future and the rest of life, being involved in the media somehow, where you're able to impact people's thoughts.
And through entertainment with the Leo.
With Leo through the entertainment industry, that could also take place. But one would guess, with the sun ruling the 10th house, that certainly issues of one's pride are tied up here. One of the challenges being the sun is so weak in the chart. So this is somebody who would also grapple a bit with self-esteem issues. Certainly there is an area of wanting recognition or pride, but feeling like there's a deficit in achieving that. And we always try to make up our deficit somehow. Friendships. The 11th house has 3.7% of his power. It's unoccupied. Mercury is the ruler. Mercury falls in the 8th house. One could certainly have losses of friends when the ruler of the 11th house falls in the 8th, or one could have friends that bring money to them, that actually collaborate with them in some ways, or work as these intermediaries for finding opportunities.
Or shady friends.
Or one could have shady friends. And tell me about the 12th house.
Urges to clean up the past and get on the spiritual journey. That's what the one theme is.
Okay. I like that thing. The urge to clean up the past and get on one's spiritual journey. Though wherever the 12th house is strong, I find persons with dominant 12th houses oftentimes feel trapped or incapacitated in some area of their life. That they're oftentimes stuck in a role that they don't always want to be in. And in here we know that a lot of it's both tied into childhood, romantic disappointments, other such things. What about institutions?
They're part of the 12th house.
So hospitals, asylums, prisons, jails, ashrams, sanctuaries, monasteries, retreat centers, they're all ruled by the 12th house. So this is somebody who is also seeking some kind of solace through an institutional environment. All right. Prominence of each planet and number of aspects received by it. We want to look at the strength of each house, note the most powerful planet sign and house, the most harmonious planet sign and house, the most discordant planet sign and house. How do we do that? Astrological. Who is here to save the day? All right. Dominant planet.
Mercury. So they're a communicator.
This is a communicator.
And they are. Is Mars? Mars is. Oh yeah, it's sort of. They're aggressive in the way they go about what they communicate.
All right. Intellectual urges combined with aggressive urges, and then universal welfare urges are all operating. The harmony, of which there is lots in this chart, comes in primarily through Pluto, working with groups, organizations, corporations, working with mass destiny. And the discord?
Looks like the ascendant. This person's personality is not very attractive.
Exactly. That is a real problem. If you have a harmonious chart and a discordant ascendant, there's no helping you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But
It makes it tough.
it makes it tough because you are a wonderful person with a rotten personality and no one wants to get near you because of that.
Right. And then the next most discordant is his MC,
Which is?
his reputation, is how people know him.
So will this be somebody known for good things or bad things?
Well,
Probably bad.
Probably bad, but he's such a nice boy. Look at the harmony in the chart.
My Pluto is even more powerful than his and more harmony. That's why, I just accept myself. There you go. I'm having fun with myself. I don't care what
If anyone else does.
That's great.
And that's an excellent attitude. Okay. Let's look at the houses. Order of importance, 8, 10, 12. What are going to be major themes in this man's life?
Other people's
Money
money
on some
his-
level.
and his business sense, his reputation, and his business,
career.
his career, and the 12th house of secret sorrows, institutions, whether it's a hospital, jail, or ashram.
Right, so death, public opinion, and imprisonment are themes in this chart. The harmony comes in through the 8th house, so where could this man do his best work?
With other
On the
people's money.
interplane.
Yeah, in hospice or on the inner plane, yes. Or in fundraising for groups, corporations, organizations, nonprofits. The greatest discord, it's a toss-up here, really, between 1st house and 6th house.
Because the 8th house is so harmonious, he's worth more dead than alive.
Then let us hope he has a good life insurance policy so that someone can benefit.
That's funny.
Um,
He's only got 2 discordant houses, huh?
I know. Look at that. 3, 4.
3? Oh, I see that, yeah.
Yeah, but basically the first and sixth house are noticeable, then the 7th and the 3rd.
Yeah. That seems not very well.
And what about the signs? Gemini, Leo, Libra. I think, I will, I balance. Gemini is the most harmonious. This could give one some elocution or writing ability or very clever thinking. Aries, actually, Taurus is the most discordant. So what are the worst qualities? Inflexibility, obstinacy, rigidness.
In his relationships.
And if we look at the aspects, the Mars-Mercury conjunction has a power of 12.29. And I would say, compared to all the other numbers of the aspects, this dominates the chart. What kind of Mars-Mercury conjunction? We have the aggressive urges and the intellectual urges in a prominence compound.
He's a go-getter for whatever it is he's getting.
He's figured out to get to the inner plane quick, man.
Speed of light, speed of light.
So, let's talk quickly. We're going to have to go over a few minutes tonight. I wanted to talk about aspects tonight, and I'm picking 2 mild aspects, but 2 mildly discordant aspects. The semi-square and the sesqui-square. The semi-square is a friction compound. It takes place when any 2 planets are 1.5 signs apart or 45 degrees. It is mildly discordant. It manifests as uncertainty and vacillation. This is not the big problems in your life. It's not the big cataclysmic disruptions. It's actually those underlying things that create hesitation, worry, anxiety. It is the many recurring abrasions in life. So, what are the difference between cataclysmic events and recurring abrasions?
One wears you away and the other one takes it away.
Right, one can take you away, but the others can wear you away, certainly.
Or like not doing something about it until something happens to get you moving again.
Creates a lot of underlying stress. It's sort of, I compare semi-squares and sesqui-squares to living in an apartment next door to somebody who plays their stereo too loud. And they're very fond of heavy metal.
And you don't like it.
And you don't like heavy metal. It's an annoying, abrasive situation that won't go away. And the only thing we can do with that? Put on your happy face.
And try to work something out with your neighbor.
Did I miss something? Let's look here. Well, there's only 4 semi-squares in this chart. There's a semi-square from the Sun to Venus. So here are reoccurring abrasions between the self-esteem, the Sun, and Venus, one's affections. There's a semi-square between Mercury and the midheaven, one's thoughts, and one's reputation. Concerns about one's reputation create mild anxiety. There's a semi-square between Mars and the midheaven. So one can get a reputation for their aggression, being just mildly abrasive. And lastly, there's a semi-square between Jupiter and Uranus in this chart, which is Jupiter, the religious urges of the soul, and Uranus, all things unconventional, unique, different. So this is somebody who might really have some issues, reoccurring issues over religious things, especially with the 9th house involvement here. Let's look at the Seskai square. Hope you all don't mind going over another 5 to 7 minutes. Seskai square is an agitation compound. Think of that cycle on your washer. Ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk. Listening to that for any length of time will have an impact. 2 planets are 3 1/2 signs apart, 135 degrees. Like the semi-square, it's moderately discordant. Like the semi-square, it's not the big events, but it breaks up already existing conditions. Things that look like they're stable do tend to just fall apart under this aspect. You know, it's like sitting in a really old chair that's been sitting out on the porch with a cane seat. And in New Mexico, the dryness just sucks the moisture out of it, and you sit in it, and you don't get the experience you were expecting. It just falls apart underneath you. So, what do? You put on your happy face again, and you move with grace and composure and find another chair. So, here we have a few. There are 5 Seskai squares in this chart. The first that we see is the Sun to Neptune and to the ascendant. So, that creates some issues in seeing oneself clearly. When the Sun is in an agitation compound with Neptune, Neptune tends to bring in illusions. Here it can be around one's sense of confidence or one's self-worth. And again with the ascendant, which we know is incredibly discordant in this chart. This is somebody who could have a somewhat repelling personality and not necessarily be able to identify why. What else do we have? The Moon forms a Seskai square to the Mercury-Mars conjunction. So what happens in terms of the mentality? Both the Moon and Mercury govern mentality. Mercury, rational thought. The Moon are inner impulses. They're not cooperating well with one another.
A little instability there.
It creates some instability. What else have we got going on here? There's a Seskai square from Jupiter to Neptune.
And Jupiter.
Somebody taking our trash out for us?
Oh, that's what that was, yeah.
But who would that be?
Our 8th house friends. Jupiter to Neptune.
Religious urges and the utopian urges are in an agitation compound. So this is somebody who might really expect a lot from the behavior or the morals of others and get disappointed when they aren't met.
Now, why did you say morals? Because it's
Jupiter, yeah.
Okay.
What about Jupiter and
Oh my
Saturn?
God.
All right, it's such a nice harmonious chart. This is one of the curveballs I was going to throw in our class, which is, can you look at a chart and tell that this is a serial murderer? No,
How would you know that? I mean,
you can't. Why? Because all a chart shows is potential. It does not tell you the purpose to which an individual has directed their will. That's our free will. Those are the choices we make. But let's look here. This guy was known as Son of Sam. David Berkowitz terrorized New York from July 1976 through July 1977 with a string. Add an H in your mind, with a string of arsons and serial shootings.
that was
I believe there were close to 3,000 arsons.
Wow.
Mercury, Mars,
He was aggressive.
conjunct.
And here we're talking about aggressive talking, and it was really aggressive action.
Yeah, he owned a lighter.
Well, was he determined to be a little mentally unsound?
No, because he went to prison. And if you're mentally unsound, you go into a mental health facility. So,
He didn't talk about hearing voices.
yes, he did. Well,
Okay,
we will
well,
get
I
to
mean,
that.
I was going
So,
to say, there was a period of time in this country where, you
he claims to have joined a cult in 1975 that introduced him to fortune telling, seances, drug use, violent crime. That same year now, we don't know if that's true or not, but that was what he claimed. That same year on Christmas Eve, he committed his first violent crime, attacking Michelle Foreman with a knife. Although 1977 was one of the hottest summers on record, people stayed indoors for fear of being the next victim. Women cut and dyed their hair blonde, since all of the victims had long, dark hair. Wig shops could not keep up with the demand for blonde wigs. On August 10th, 1977, Berkowitz was arrested while starting his yellow Ford Galaxy outside his apartment in Yonkers. The first words out of his mouth were, "You got me? What took you so long?" Public chart. At his trial in 1978, Berkowitz pleaded insanity, claiming that God spoke to him, voices, through his neighbor's dog. The dog was brought to the witness stand. He didn't agree.
I was just going to say, if he had said something other than his neighbor's dog, he may have been listened to.
I'll blame it on the dog.
but the fact that he had
Poor
no
dog
empathy,
didn't do it.
there's got to be a huge factor in this too.
You know, I have my own armchair psychology about this, looking at the chart. All right. Sentenced to 6 life sentences in prison for the murders, making his maximum term 365 years. Prison. Berkowitz became a born-again Christian while in prison, and he has promised to, if he's allowed to write his autobiography, his memoirs, and publish them, that all the money from that will go to the survivors of the families of his victims. So there you see the harmonious 8th house, the Jupiter there, the ability to be an incredible fundraiser, which is the best possible thing this man could do.
And to turn like that to become a born-again Christian, he's probably safer. Everybody's safer that he's in prison. If he got out of prison, he might reverse to the side again.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, Uranus in the 9th house can be turning on a dime as far as one's faith is concerned.
Probably happy where he's at. He's probably happier than anywhere else.
Where did the son of Sam come from?
It's not clear because his father was not Sam. He was actually, I seem to have left it out of here. His
There.
Okay. Basically, he was born Richard David Falco, immediately put up for adoption as a baby. 4th house.
Missing from
His mother, actually what happened was, his mother, while married to Falco, had an affair with someone else. And he was the child of that union. So the baby was put up for adoption, ruler of the 4th house in the 12th house. Adopted by Pearl and Nathan Berkowitz, hardware store owners, who changed his name. In terms of work, Aries on the 6th house cuts. he was trained as a sharpshooter.
Did you skip one again?
Oh, this thing goes fast.
And the next
Keep
one
going.
talks about him joining the army.
Yeah.
All right, 1971, he enlisted in the U.S. Army, trained as a sharpshooter, served in Korea. After honorable discharge in 1974, he located his birth mother, Betty Falco, who revealed the disturbing details of his illegitimate conception and birth. That really upset him.
So you think he was fine until that time when he meets his mother and then he just has a break from reality? Is that?
Yeah, he must have been.
I think he was
He had a
breaking
weak-
his
He already had a weak link somewhere.
Well,
Yeah, there was already the
obviously,
weak
you know,
link,
but,
and I think
mean,
what
this is
that-
1974, and in 75 to 77 or
Right,
something like that. he had
right.
that
It started right
very
within a
close to
year.
seeing his mom.
So I think there were probably issues about the mother, but we also decided Venus, which represents women, is also the most discordant planet in the chart, ruling the 7th house of partnerships, opposing Neptune, the ruler of the 5th house. My guess is he also had a personality that may have been more repugnant than attractive. And so there were probably issues that he then developed with women because they may not have gone out with him or had repelled or rejected him in some way. This is my armchair psychologist here. Because he started, the shootings that he did were primarily women that may have been in cars with their boyfriends necking. So there's some event that happened there that we don't know about that caused a psychic break.
Maybe he came up with the Son of Sam thing. Maybe his illegitimate father was named Sam.
It could be, and I'm not sure that we know who that is,
I've
but
always wondered.
Son of Sam came out in the letter that he wrote to the, I think it wasn't the New York Times, but it was the New York Journal, or it was another paper
Yeah.
that he wrote. He left a note that was kind of rambling and, spelling in question, but, talked about being the son of Sam. And that's where that came from. So that's how he became known. Yeah.
Here's
So
something, upon questioning, Berkowitz explained that there was a 6,000-year-old man inhabiting the body of a Yonkers neighbor, Sam Carr.
Okay.
okay, there. Thank you.
6,000 years old?
Wow.
Yeah. It's a 6,000-year-old.
That's
man
older than
inhabiting
Chinese eggs.
The body. Yonkers neighbor.
He went really deep.
So I guess the dog and the neighbor.
Yeah, it was a conspiracy.
Kind of.
So yeah, and
He's probably the sixth.
yeah, we don't want to take this lightly because it's truly serious, and this is also somebody's life.
Right.
But I wanted to use this as an example that what we have to keep in mind always is that there are things that astrology can and cannot do. And I am convinced all astrology can do is give you symbols that give you pointers to someone's internal makeup, but they cannot tell you how they've chosen to express that. And that is our willpower. So here we have a chart that's marvelously harmonious, but that what this man is known for is pretty heinous deeds. And we can see, again, part of the issue here is lack of social contact other than through the imaginary sort of spirit world connections, and lack of empathy in the chart.
We still can't judge God's work. You can judge
Yeah.
the deeds, though.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't know.
So, there you have it.
Well, that's interesting.
Thank you.
Do you think something to Tarot could have